Most people who know the Sundarbans know it for one thing. Bengal tigers, the assumption is that the tigers are the story and everything else is background. That assumption misses most of what is actually happening in there. In 2011, the Wildlife Institute of India fitted GPS collars to Bengal tigers in the Sundarbans and documented individual animals swimming across tidal channels over 4 kilometers wide at night, before resuming stalking behavior on the opposite bank. That behavior has not been recorded in any other tiger population on Earth. But the GPS data revealed something beyond the swimming. Individual tigers were tracking and following the movement of patrol boats through the channels systematically, over distances of 3 kilometers repeatedly. In 2019, a Bangladesh Forest Department patrol filed an official incident report describing a saltwater crocodile on a mud flat in the interior, estimated at over 6 meters in length, a size that exceeds every confirmed measurement for the species anywhere in Asia. Neither of those is the most unsettling thing in this video. By the end, you will understand why the Sundarbans is not just dangerous, it is documented, verified, and still not fully explained. The Sundarbans spans approximately 10,000 square kilometers across the delta of the Ganges, Brahmaputra, and Meghna rivers, straddling the border between West Bengal in India and the Hulna division of Bangladesh. It is the largest contiguous mangrove forest on Earth. Its interior is a maze of tidal channels, mudflats, and vegetation, so structurally uniform that experienced rangers have described entering zones where every direction looks identical to every other direction. The land and water here are not clearly separated. The tide moves the boundary twice a day, and the map that was accurate at dawn is inaccurate by noon. Systematic wildlife study of the Sundarbans began in the 1970s, driven by Project Tiger, India's national tiger conservation initiative, launched in 1973. What researchers found when they entered the interior in earnest went considerably beyond tiger behavior. The Sundarbans is simultaneously one of the most studied wildlife reserves in South Asia and one of the least understood. Those two facts coexist because the interior resists the kind of sustained ground level survey that produces conclusive data, tidal movement, vegetation density, and the absence of any fixed land reference point make extended interior surveys something that most research teams attempt once and do not repeat. What the forest gives up, it gives up reluctantly, and what it has given up so far is strange enough to suggest that what it is still holding back may be stranger. Mystery number 1, the boat. Following tigers in 2011, the Wildlife Institute of India fitted GPS tracking collars to Bengal tigers in the Indian Sundarbans as part of a long-term behavioral monitoring study. The data the collars returned over the following months included something the research team had not designed the study to find. Individual tigers were following boats, not occasionally. Not incidentally, the GPS records showed specific animals returning to the same channel banks when patrol boats passed at similar times on successive days, maintaining parallel courses along the bank for distances of up to 3 kilometers before breaking off. The behavior was consistent enough across multiple individuals that it appeared in the data as a pattern rather than an anomaly. Bengal tigers in the Sundarbans have been known since at least the 19th century for behavior not observed in any mainland population. They swim voluntarily across tidal channels. They hunt in water. They have developed a relationship with the tidal environment that tigers elsewhere have not. The Sundarbans has the highest density of human tiger encounters of any tiger habitat on Earth, and researchers entering the reserve have operated for decades with the understanding that the animals here behave differently. The GPS data made clear how differently. Wildlife researchers proposed the boat. Following behavior represents an adaptation to the channel environment. Tigers learning to use human movement as an indicator of prey activity patterns in the same waterways. The boat functioning as an unintentional signal about where fish, deer, and other animals congregate. The detail that does not fit that explanation cleanly is this: the tigers documented engaging in this behavior had no prior recorded conflict incidents. These were not animals with established patterns of approaching humans. They were not escalating toward attack. They were watching, monitoring, returning to the same observation points on successive days to track the same boats. How long that behavior has been developing, and how much of it happens at night, beyond any camera's reach, the data cannot say. What the next discovery suggests is that the tigers may not be the only large predator in those channels doing the watching. Mystery number 2, the oversized saltwater crocodile. In 2019, a Bangladesh Forest Department patrol operating in the Sharankola Range filed an official incident report describing a saltwater crocodile encountered on a mudflat adjacent to an interior channel. The patrol supervisor estimated the animal at over 6 meters in length. The report was filed. It was acknowledged. No follow-up survey was conducted. Saltwater crocodiles are confirmed residents of the Sundarbans on both sides of the delta. The species is the largest living reptile on Earth. That is not disputed. What is disputed, quietly, by the 2019 report, is where the upper limit of that size actually sits in this particular forest. The largest reliably measured wild saltwater crocodile on record was documented in Australia. It measured 6.3 meters. The largest confirmed specimens from Asia fall short of that figure by a meaningful margin. A 6-meter animal in the Bangladesh Sundarbans would not just be a large crocodile, it would be the largest confirmed crocodile ever recorded in Asia. By enough of a margin to matter scientifically, herpetologists familiar with the region have proposed an explanation that is difficult to argue with in principle. The interior channels of the Sundarbans, largely unpatrolled, tidally rich in prey, and minimally disturbed by human activity, theoretically provide exactly the conditions under which a crocodile population could reach sizes exceeding those recorded in more accessible habitats: reduced hunting pressure, abundant food, decades of protection under reserve status. The biology supports the possibility. The problem is that no systematic survey of crocodile populations in the deep interior has ever been conducted. The 2019 sighting is an official government document describing an animal of record size in a habitat capable of producing it with no scientific follow-up. What else is reaching exceptional size in those interior channels is a question that has not been formally asked. The channels are long. The surveys have stayed near the edges. The next accounts did not come from a patrol report. They came from rangers who had spent years in those channels and who described something they could not put a name to. Mystery number 3. The unidentified aquatic accounts between 2003 and 2017. A series of accounts later compiled by Indian wildlife researcher Pranabev's Sanyal, one of the longest-serving field directors of the Sundarbans Tiger Reserve, described encounters by Forest Department rangers with large aquatic animals in the deep interior channels that the rangers themselves could not identify as any known species. These were not formal wildlife sighting reports. They were recorded in personal field notes and in conversations Sanyal documented across 3 decades of fieldwork in the reserve. Pranabev's Sanyal is not a fringe figure. He spent over 30 years conducting ecological research in the Indian Sundarbans. His work on tiger behavior, mangrove systems, and human-wildlife conflict is cited across South Asian conservation literature. When Sanyal wrote something down, it was because he considered it worth writing down. The ranger accounts described large, dark animals moving through interior channels at low tide, estimated at 3 to 4 meters in length, moving with a lateral undulation that the rangers, men with years of experience in those specific channels, specifically described as inconsistent with crocodile locomotion. surfacing briefly, submerging without the behavior pattern of any aquatic species they recognized. Samuel proposed the most conservative explanation available. Large water monitor lizards, Varanus salvator, observed under conditions of poor visibility and stress, size and behavior misread in the moment. It is a reasonable proposal. Water monitors are common in the Sundarbans. Rangers encounter them regularly. They are among the most familiar large reptiles in the reserve. The rangers who reported these accounts knew that several had over a decade of field experience in the same channels. They were not describing monitor lizards, they were describing something else, and they were specific about the distinction. Samuel recorded the accounts and proposed a provisional explanation he did not fully commit to. A researcher who spent 30 years in that forest, who knew its animals as well as anyone alive, looked at what his rangers were telling him and called his own explanation provisional. That is not nothing. What comes next does not involve an animal at all. It involves trained researchers with working instruments, a mapped area, and 4 hours they cannot fully account for. Mystery number 4. Sundarbans disorientation in 2009. A joint Indian-Bangladeshi research team conducting a mangrove health survey in the interior became disoriented in a section of forest they had mapped and entered multiple times on previous survey days. They spent approximately 4 hours unable to locate their entry channel before reorienting by following tidal water flow outward. The incident was documented in the survey's field note and later referenced by environmental researcher Anu Halay in her 2010 ethnographic study of Sundarbans community's forest of tigers. These was not a team of inexperienced visitors. These were trained researchers operating in a zone they had surveyed before, carrying GPS equipment and physical maps of the area they were working in. Local communities living on the edges of the Sundarbans have described this phenomenon for generations. A sense of the forest resisting navigation, landmarks that should be fixed, appearing to shift directions that were certain becoming uncertain without any observable cause. Scientists had treated these accounts as cultural narrative, the kind of story a community builds around a dangerous place to explain why people do not come back from it. The 2009 incident complicated that dismissal. Mangrove ecologists have proposed the mechanism. The Sundarbans' tidal dynamism is extreme enough that land boundaries shift twice daily, sediment repositions with seasonal flow, and vegetation that was at one location on a previous survey day has physically moved by the time the team returns. A map made last week is not the same forest this week. The landscape changes faster than human spatial memory can compensate for. GPS coordinates do not shift with the tide. The 2009 team had functioning GPS equipment throughout those 4 hours. The instruments did not fail. The disorientation persisted anyway. The mechanism that caused trained researchers with working instruments to lose orientation in a mapped area for 4 hours has not been formally studied. It has been noted, explained provisionally, and moved past. What happens to the people who enter without instruments, without maps, and without anyone who knows they went in is a question the disappearance statistics begin to answer, but only begin. The next discovery does not involve disorientation or unknown animals. It involves something that communities living around the Sundarbans have been recording accurately for centuries, long before science arrived to verify it. Mystery number 5, the Dokin Rai accounts. Dokin Rai is the name given by Sundarbans communities on both the Indian and Bangladeshi sides of the delta to a forest deity traditionally described as capable of taking the form of a tiger. The tradition is centuries old. What makes it relevant here is not the religious dimension, it is the behavioral descriptions embedded in the folklore that, when separated from their mythological framing, match instrumental data that did not exist until 2011. Anthropologist Anu Halay documented the Dokin Rai tradition extensively Alternatively, in Forest of Tigers, community accounts gathered across both sides of the delta consistently described an entity that watched from the water's edge, that followed boats without attacking, that appeared and disappeared at the boundary between the tidal channel and the forest interior, not hunting, watching. That is the behavior the Wildlife Institute of India's GPS data documented in 2011, decades after the oral tradition had encoded it. The tradition did not describe a tiger that hunted boats. It described one that monitored them. That distinction, present in community accounts going back multiple generations before any scientific instrument entered the Sundarbans, maps precisely onto what the collar data showed. Individual animals, specific channel banks, successive days, the same boats. Anthropologists have proposed the explanation that fits the evidence most cleanly. The Dokhin Rai tradition represents generations of accumulated ecological observation, accurate behavioral data encoded in religious narrative. Because that was the available transmission technology. No written records, no camera traps. A story told to children about a god that watches from the water, because the alternative was telling them that the tigers had learned to watch from the water, and that knowledge needed to survive. It survived, and it turned out to be correct. If 4 centuries of oral tradition accurately encoded boat following behavior long before science documented it, the tradition almost certainly contains other behavioral observations that researchers have not yet thought to look for, descriptions that have been read as mythology. The year that has been sitting in plain sight in the wrong category. What else is in those accounts has not been systematically investigated. Nobody has gone back through the oral record looking for the next thing that turns out to be true. What comes next is the discovery that sits underneath all of this, the one that has been in the official record for 50 years and has never been the subject of a dedicated investigation. Everything in this video has a name attached to it. The EPS scholar study, a patrol report, a field director's notes, a researcher's ethnography. The Sundarbans has been documented, studied, and monitored for 50 years by 2 national governments and multiple international conservation bodies. And every year, between 30 and 50 people enter the Indian Sundarbans and do not come back. That figure appears in official Forest Department statistics annually. The Bangladeshi side records comparable numbers. It has been consistent since systematic record keeping began under Project Tiger in the 1970s. 5 decades of records, 2 countries, the same residual figure year after year in a forest with the most intensively studied predator population in South Asia. The year encounters account for a documented proportion of those disappearances. Crocodile encounters account for another. Drowning in the interior channels accounts for more. When those categories are subtracted from the annual figures, a residual remains, not a large number in absolute terms, consistent enough across 50 years of records, across 2 separate national jurisdictions using different reporting systems to appear in the data as something other than noise. That residual has never been the subject of a dedicated scientific investigation. It appears in the annual reports. It is noted. It is not studied. Forest ecologists familiar with the figures have proposed the most available explanation: drowning incidents in remote interior channels where tidal movement carries bodies away before recovery is possible. It is a reasonable explanation. The Sundarbans' tidal dynamics make unrecovered drowning genuinely plausible in the interior zones. Drowning rates in comparable tidal environments elsewhere in the Bengal Delta do not produce unrecovered disappearances at the same statistical rate. That comparison has been noted in passing in ecological literature. It has not been followed up on. The Sundarbans has both following tigers, exceptional crocodiles, unidentified channel animals, documented disorientation of equipped research teams, and an oral tradition that turned out to encode accurate behavioral data across 4 centuries. It also has a disappearance rate that its own explanatory framework does not fully account for. 15 years, 2 countries, a number that does not go away. What the Sundarbans is doing with the people who go into it and do not come back is the one question in this video that the existing record cannot answer. Every discovery in this video shares the same feature. The evidence exists, the patrol reports exist, the GPS data exists, the field notes exist, the oral tradition exists, the disappearance statistics exist, and in every case, the science stopped at the point where following up would have required going deeper into the interior than the research budgets, the safety protocols, and the institutional appetite for uncertainty were willing to go. The Sundarbans sits between two of the most densely populated nations on Earth. It has been a protected reserve for 50 years. Researchers have been working its edges for decades. Its interior is still, in the most meaningful scientific sense, unexamined, not unknown. Unexamined, the distinction matters more than it might seem. The Sundarbans has been studied for 50 years and is still producing things that do not fit the existing record. That is not a failure of science. It is a measure of how much forest there is left to answer for. Which discovery in this video do you think most urgently needs a dedicated investigation? Cryptic finds will keep asking until someone goes back in.